Hey everybody, some Christian guy. Welcome back to my channel. Find me on Facebook at some Christian guy. You can find me on oneway.com/ram media, and you can also find me on YouTube under the same name. Welcome back. Glad you could join us. Now today I'm going to be talking about, let me go back to my intro here, identifying cultish behavior. Cultish behavior. Now, the reason I'm going to be talking about this today is we have quite a proliferation of this sort of thing these days, and cults really tend to fascinate people quite a lot. And cults, in a lot of ways, are one of the most commonly used arguments by atheists to dismiss religion, because they say it's fanatical, etc., etc. And you've got the Charles Manson and all these other funny individuals and all that sort of thing. And then you've got your Benny Hinn type of people, your charismatic preachers, the babbling and all that kind of nonsense. And so, but the thing is, right, when it comes to forming a cult, the individual that is the individual that is driving the cult, the guru or whatever the case might be, is relying on certain relying on certain preconditions within the individuals to have certain personality types, traits, whatever the case might be, because obviously if there's a specific profile, because obviously not everyone falls for in fact most people don't, at least we would like to think that most people don't fall for cults, but I'm actually going to show that the vast majority of people actually do either fall for cults outright, or to varying degrees display very cult-like tendencies, even if they're not explicitly a member of a cult. And you will find people, these will be people in church, these will be people at work, all these kinds of things. And there's certain behaviors that you will find all over the place. And I just want to discuss, I'm going to go through, I just got a couple of points, not a couple, a few points where the sort of the main identifiers of what a cult is, and sort of explain how do we see this everywhere else. Because as Christians, we warn against fanaticism. We warn against being drawn away to false doctrines and cults and all these kinds of things. And it would be a good idea to sort of know what we're looking for, at the end of the day, because contrary to the Bible's teaching, many cults are actually call themselves Christian. Okay, so we need to have a squiz at this particular issue to see what's going on, and to show that even though the modern secular individual believes himself or herself to be very enlightened, right? The West believes itself to be very enlightened. We come out of the Enlightenment, out of the French Revolution, all these kinds of things. We've left religion and this whole fanaticism behind, and we're so much more civilized now. And you get these atheistic idiots, not Sam Harris. I'll throw Sam Harris. He's one of the better ones. I actually don't mind the guy too much. I actually kind of like him, because I believe he's at least sincere. Maybe, I mean, I might be naive, but like your Dawkins types, the real morons like that, believe that that the way forward is to just abandon religion, and we're going to be all fine, and we'll live according very rational, very very cerebral lives. And what he doesn't realize is that these guys don't seem to realize is that I mean, religions throughout ancient history had cults of reason too. Okay, so these guys have basically they don't realize they've dropped one type of cult for another, which is the cult of reason, which basically every atheist subscribes to, is the cult of reason. Okay, and the cult of reason. Strangely enough, they're like, oh, in the Enlightenment, but the Enlightenment itself, even though they went against the church and against Christianity and stuff like that, the whole philosophy was driven by religious philosophy, by occult philosophy, right? So they think they're anti. They think they're being anti-religion, but the whole secular project is an occult religious uh, experiment, if you will. So I'm going to be pointing out this kind of stuff absolutely everywhere, because man, it needs to be pointed out, because I'm seeing this not only in the world, but I'm seeing it in my church as well, and it concerns me because I don't see anyone. Very few people are addressing it. So we got to catch on. Right. So the first point, the very first point, how to spot cultish behavior, how to spot a cult or something that's about to turn into a cult. The very first one, the most obvious point, is you will always have the guru. All right. And the guru, and it doesn't even have to be called a guru. All right. Can be whatever. You have the leader, right? The leader. You're not allowed to question the leader at all. Okay? If you say anything, right, then all the leader's little minions come and attack you. Okay? They come and they mob harass you, they attack you, they discredit you, they make your life an absolute living hell. Does this sound familiar by any chance? Right? And also, the leaders very often live in contradiction, in stark contradiction to the philosophies that they're putting forward, right? But because you're not allowed to question them, they get away with it, right? There's an excuse. So what happens is, how do you see this? Do you see, where do you see it? Now, you obviously like, if you think, like, look at them, like take your like the Krishna consciousness movement that came in the 60s, or even sort of in the 50s already. You have these gurus that preach, come in from the east, and I fell for it. I tried. Oh, maybe fell for it is the wrong thing. But back when I was experimenting with religions, I joined sort of the Hare Krishna movement for a while, and I was reading the books of man, I can never pronounce the name, brah. What's it? Swami, whatever. Okay, absolute craziness. You know what? Let me see if I can pull the guy up. Pull, uh, uh, Krishna conscious. It was the Krishna conscious. Oh, it's not typing. Krishna consciousness. Right, Krishna consciousness. So the Krishna consciousness, or the Hare Krishnas and stuff like that, they are very very well known in South Africa, for example, because I used to live in South Africa. So the Krishna consciousness was quite big there. So if you have a look here, right, you'll see this is the individual who is one of the big ones, right? His divine grace. The Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder of Acharya International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Right, so you get these types. There's another Swami, I forget what his name is, and the guy is, and so basically, the people live in virtual poverty, right? They give up all of their wealth and all these kinds of things, and they love Western foreigners. Off the go, give the money and all these kinds of things, and they preach all this humility and all this piety. Meanwhile, the guy's got like 12 Rolls Royces. Okay. So that's the kind of thing, right? And these are sort of the icons and stuff. But what you also find is, you find the same thing in the secular world. The absolute same thing in the secular world. And I'm going to show you quickly one of the biggest gurus of the secular world, right? And as soon as you see the picture, you're gonna laugh. I promise you, you're gonna laugh, right? Do you want to see who it is, right? I'm gonna show you quickly. There he is, Al Gore. One of the modern gurus. Okay. Why do I say this? Okay, why do I say this? Because this is the cult. This is one of the main icons of the cult of environmentalism, right? According to this guy, right? It's now 2019, okay? According to this bloke, we should have, by 2015, we should have all been underwater, ice caps melted, apocalypse, right? Not a single climate alarmist environment, global warming prediction, none came true. None. Absolutely none. And this has quietly gone away, and now they call it climate change, okay? Well, which tells you nothing. The climate changes. Duh, okay? But what did these guys now say? Well, first of all, try questioning try questioning global warming, etc., 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 and see what happens to you. All the little environmentalist little minions go running after you, right? And they will rip you to pieces. And they will picket in the streets, and they will protest in the streets, and they will carry on. And what does he say? What does this guy say? You're not allowed to question, because I've got the experts and I've got the whatever. And you cannot question it, right? And I see this even in my own church, right? I literally had this argument 2 or 3 weeks ago where a few weeks ago it snowed here in the UK. We're just now coming out of our winter, and this photo of the snow, because it snowed for over the weekend and stuff like that, and I cycle to work every day and picture and up the snow. And I'm like, and I just took a dig. It was a joke, right? I took a dig at the whole global warming thing. And this one guy who's actually a member of my church, not the one here, but the global church. He's in another country. This idiot just went completely off at me, right? About how this, and the Bible says, and they try to justify it from the Bible because the Bible says and stuff. Yes, the Bible does predict a lot of turbulence and tribulation, etc., etc., at the end of days. Yes, absolutely, it predicts that. But what these secular religious fanatics, environmentalist fanatics are proposing has nothing to do with the Bible. Okay, it's got nothing to do with it. There's a whole separate agenda there. And yet all of these retards in the Christian church jump up and down, because it's been prophesied, so let's go with it. Give the government, give the globalists all of this money and power to basically go and bring about the utopia, whatever the case might be. So Christians are so stupid sometimes, my goodness, just people, just all over the place, right? And so you're not allowed to question this. And then their lives are in complete contradiction to what they preach, because we need to be more careful. All of this environmentalist piety. Oh, our carbon footprint, this and this and that. Meanwhile, these fools are driving around in like a V12, right? Gas guzzlers, flying in jets all over the place. They live these lavish, wasteful lifestyles. When you actually scrutinize their lifestyles, the lifestyle is absolutely, they expect us, so they want to tax, and this is the basically what they do, right? They live these lavish lifestyles. Their lives are in complete contradiction to the environmentalist philosophy that they're putting forward. You're not allowed to question them, right? But yet you, the stupid fanatic, the serf, you need to be taxed through the nose by your government in order to fund all of these endeavors to end climate change, to reduce our carbon footprint, right? So they will want to tax you into oblivion and bring out all of these really punitive legislations because, and we must be kept because the cows are farting too much. So now we must all become vegan because cow farting because cow farting is going to bring about the end of the world. and it's just one after the other, and most people are too idiotic to realize that not 50 years ago there were other people going on about global cooling, that the world was going to end in another ice age, right? So back then, 50 years ago, it was global cooling. And then if you remember, those of us that were kids in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, you'll remember how they were jumping up and down about CFCs, and there's going to be a hole in the ozone layer and all these kinds of things. And it's always these fanatical things, and they bring about these principles, and yet these people, they live these lavish lifestyles, and who's the one that suffers? Who's the one that has to live like some stupid peasant, bowing to the lords, the all wisdom people? So and that's it, and if you question, they get all of their little cult followers, their little cult minions, to go on the internet, right, all the little keyboard warriors, or to go out into the streets to go and lobby. Meanwhile, these guys are rubbing shoulders. Half of them are rubbing shoulders with the people that are meant to be the problem, like, oh, big oil and big this and big that. Meanwhile, these guys, there's money changing hands. It's a whole, this whole globalist thing, right? Which actually then brings me to my next point. One thing people don't realize, the second point, is these gurus often have ties to secret societies and government spy agencies. Not always, but you often find, if you go and you really scrutinize the individual and go into his background, you find that individual has already previously got some very, very dodgy type of past, and he himself was involved in some occult thing, right? So a lot of these secular people jump in, like for example, here's another retard that everyone thinks is a guru. Let's find him. The only difference is with this guy, he's actually already for the most part, begun to discredit himself. A lot of people are already believing this guy to be a little bit of a retard, and they're no longer taking him seriously. There we go, old Bill Nye. This guy is just such an imbecile. Now, just to so you can understand how far out these guys are, right? Is they're like, they will actually go as far as to say, like, this idiot, this Bill Nye, oh, people should be imprisoned if they don't go along, if they deny climate change. It's like, it's don't talk against the Führer, otherwise execution, right? Don't say anything about Comrade Stalin or Comrade Mao, otherwise off to prison, off to the gulag with you, right? It's the same thing with this retard, this Bill Nye, right? Oh, if you deny climate change, you should be imprisoned. Idiot, right? It's that kind of, don't question it, otherwise, boom, off to the gulag to you, right? This punitive thing. And you see that these guys like Al Gore and whatever else, and even if you go to other guys, a lot of these cult members, when you investigate a lot of them, you find that these movements, right, are funded by C.I.A, are operated by C.I.A. There's C.I.A operatives behind it. There are occult and secret societies. So you've got your Illuminati, you've got your Freemasons, you've got your Jesuits, and all that kind of stuff involved. For example, another perfect example of a major cult movement is you've got your feminism, you've got your Black Lives Matter, and all these kinds of things, funded by like George Soros, like these big bankers, Rockefeller, Carnegie Foundation, and all that kind of stuff. All of these Fabian Society, all these Illuminists, they're pumping millions, right? Millions into the gurus that lead, that go ahead in the march to promote and prop up this fanatical ideology that's all being funded. And when you look at the leaders, right, like even the leaders of the Black Lives Matters, the ones that started it was these three chicks. I mean, they all had occult ties and stuff like that. If you look at Al Gore as well, and I wouldn't be surprised, I mean, Bill Nye might just be a useful idiot, right? It's quite likely, because he really is an idiot, right? He might just be a useful idiot. But I wouldn't be surprised to find if the guy had some sort of ties to some secret society somewhere. Like even Bush, right? He was a complete moron. Total moron. People were constantly laughing at the guy, but he was a Skull and Bones member, so maybe they just play the role of a moron. You never know. So a lot of the times they've got these ties to secret societies and stuff like that. If you think about even, if I'm not mistaken, the Mormons and stuff like that, right? The guy had ties to Freemasonry, so on and so forth. Very, very often you see that there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on in the background that props them up. sort of thing. If you think about even if you think about the Catholic Church, now the Catholic Church is not considered a cult proper, but the Catholic Church itself has got proliferation of orders all over the place, Templars and all these, which are sort of Catholic orders, such a proliferation and stuff like that. And you've also got this top heavy bureaucracy where you don't question, you don't question the guy, the Pope, if he speaks et ex cathedra, whatever, you don't question the guy. That's it. There's the guru. Islam is the same thing, right? You've got the prophet, you don't question the prophet, you're not allowed, and then the prophet, and then you've got the imams, they dictate, and what the imam says is that's it, right? They dictate your life, sort of thing, and they're always up there pulling the strings, and they convince the idiots, the useful idiots at the bottom, that they're being liberated. You're being liberated. You are being freed from the shackles of whatever. Okay, you're being freed from the shackles of so there's always a boogeyman, right? There's the boogeyman. Back in the day, it used to be communism. Well, free you from the shackles of communism. Meanwhile, it was the West that exported the collectivist idea to the East in the first place, right? Because the whole collectivist ideology came out of the Enlightenment as well. The Jacobins, were very, very collectivists, and they exported it. And Russia, the Soviet Union, was built by the West, built by banking interests and all that kind of stuff, right? But now we must be afraid. So afraid. And it's the same thing even today, right? You have people all over the place on one side wanting to push communism and your Bernie Sanders types, and then the other people are, now we should speak out against this collectivist nonsense, but we should speak out against all of it, right? Whether it's right or left, it's a dialectic, and that's how they move people, that's how they manipulate people, right? But there's always an enemy, there's always a dialectic somewhere with these people, and that's how you see that with the politicians. There's always an enemy, there's always a terrorist, right? There's a terrorist, there is an enemy that wants to kill us, right? Rely on me and I'm going to save you. Right? Rely on me. Oh, I'm going to save you, and I'm the way to salvation, and this philosophy, and so on and so forth. So very, very often, and you're being played for a fool. You're being taken for a ride. Now, third point. Very, very cultish behavior. Very anti-logic. You're not allowed to have logic at all. Why? Because you cannot manipulate logical people. Right? Very, very anti-logic. You are not allowed, and it's part of it sort of ties in with not being allowed to question, right? You can't question, you can't reason, you can't whatever. And here's the thing, right? Because I mean, and you get it like at the moment, and the pendulum is going to swing, right? It's already swinging. It's been swinging since about. The pendulum has been swinging because you've got in the United States your left-right dichotomy. The pendulum was already swinging under Obama, under his second term, right? Was already swinging towards people swinging because the left was getting so absurd, so the pendulum was already swinging, right? But one thing that really, really characterizes the left in general is just complete and utter illogical, absolutely illogical, totally irrational, totally relativistic, completely led by the nose through emotions and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely, utterly illogical. And and here's the problem, and this is a big problem that I have with Christianity as it is today, and it's a fight that I'm having in my church. Right? I don't mean necessarily just in my local church, though that too, not just in my local church, but in my church in general. And it's a problem I have not only in my church, but in the world at large, is the way people shun logic is unbelievable. Then you go to church every week and you get preached at, and that's it. and the sermon is not particularly intellectual, is not particularly, it doesn't necessarily elevate. And here's the thing, right? A lot of people will condemn me for saying so. How can you speak against the thing? But literally every single person I know, right? Go to any church, go to any Christian, and every single one of them will complain that the sermons are mundane, are boring, do not stimulate, do not appeal to the mind, do not appeal to the intellect. And we know, and we can see, for in the vast majority of cases, they're just appealing to the emotions, right? That's what they do. It's switch the brain off, completely switch the brain off, and just be dictated to. So you don't question, and if you don't question, well then how do you know? If you can't question, if you can't investigate, if you can't rush, then how do you know what to believe? You get dictated to. Someone tells you, right? And you find that, and it's like, it's not that now, my church or Christianity, whatever, has necessarily become a cult, but you're seeing these cult-like behaviors as well. For example, let me give you an example that I personally faced within my own church denomination, and I'm seeing this more and more. Interestingly enough, I actually had a conversation just 2 days ago, because on my youth group, we've got a WhatsApp group for the youth, and some kid posted up a little meme of one of our pastors saying something, and a little excerpt from a sermon of one of our pastors somewhere. And he made 3 points, right? 2 of the 3 points were completely and utterly false, totally wrong, factually wrong, right? Factually wrong. And so I went in there and I pointed it out. I said, listen, I understand what he's trying to say, okay? But it's no excuse for being that blatantly wrong. That blatantly wrong. Okay? And what I got immediately, not a single person was like, yeah, hands up, he's wrong and we should be careful about being very precise. And as the Bible says, don't turn to the left, you be precise. Instead, I got nothing but apologetics for trying to rationalize what this post was saying. And I said to him, listen guys, this is not on. This is not on, because if this is how we deal with things, then we can rationalize whatever the hell we want. This is a slippery slope, right? Another situation, same thing. You're not allowed to question this nonsense, right? I was still fairly young in the faith, and there was also one of our pastors, a guy from the United States. I'm not going to mention his name or anything like that, right? But he had a Facebook group, and this is the problem, right? What you call personality cults, where people get attach themselves to a preacher, and this preacher can do no wrong, right? And they form Facebook groups around him and Facebook pages around him, and they follow him, and this, if you, there's no better way to feed someone's ego than through social media. I don't think Christians are prepared for what social media is designed to actually do, right? Social media, the way it is designed today, because there are other ways it could be designed, is designed to cultivate narcissism in the people, in the population. That's what it's designed to do. Okay? Not that it necessarily will, because there's a lot of decent people out there with ministries and stuff, and they're fine. But if you have the tendency in you to be really narcissistic and really arrogant and really whatever, then it can be a snare. It can really get you. Anyway, so this pastor, right, he posted a quote from one of our founders, right? And the reason why I mention he's American is a good reason for it. The Americans, as we know, have this tendency to abbreviate the living heck out of everything. They abbreviate everything. They love their acronyms, and they assume that everyone in the world operates the exact same way, right? So they just, everything is just acronym, it's just letters. You get letters and numbers, and that's the reference, you know, and you're like, where does this reference come from? Okay. So he quoted one of our founders, and instead of writing out the full reference, he did the typical American thing, acronym and whatever and stuff like that. So, which is, you know, fair enough, okay? So someone who was a member of this group typed in the comments, he's like, listen, I don't know where this, I can't understand the reference. Could you give me the reference? Which one of this, because this person was quite a prolific writer, which one of her books, it's Ellen White, which one of her books was this? Now, he could have handled it very well and simply said, oh, here we go, there's the full reference. There it is, write it out in full. What did this pastor choose to do instead? He completely took the poor guy, doesn't know him from a bar of soap, didn't know this guy from a bar of soap, took this poor guy to pieces, right? You should know the reference. You clearly don't read Ellen White enough. You should already know this. For all this idiot knows, right? This guy has been member of the church for 2 days, or 5 minutes, or whatever, right? But it doesn't matter. Even if the guy has been a lifelong member of the church, if he's not an American, right, and used to that way they do things, right? Because I know, like in South Africa, and now I live in the UK, people here tend to just give the full reference, right? They write it out. They write it out, and that's what we're used to. Took him to pieces, absolutely humiliated him in public, right? Didn't even go in private, right? Right there in the comments, bam, took this guy to task, right? Totally humiliated him. And so now, me being me, I saw this, and I went, I went into the comments and I said to the pastor, said, what the hell do you think you are all about? You arrogant so-and-so. You could have just answered the guy, but instead you have to humiliate him in public. You, this and this and that. I hadn't been an Adventist very long myself. And not that I wouldn't have done the same thing today, but I might have been a little bit less controversial. So I put my hands up. I could have been better. But let me tell you, not a single person on this page piped up to say, listen, Morgan, you could have done this better, but yeah, pastor, you know, you didn't have to be so harsh with the guy. He's asking, you could have just answered his question. No. They instead proceeded to impute my character. I just got bombarded by every single Adventist, every single member of this group, right? Telling me that I am a this and a that and a that, and I'm an apostate, and I'm an unbeliever, I'm immature in the faith, I must be being influenced by Satan, and all this kind of stuff. How dare I? It's like I shot the sacred cow. Right? And at no point did this pastor apologize for what he did public. And here's the absolute, this is what really grates me, right? Because they started insisting, because in the Bible there's a procedure that is spelled out for how you should deal with conflict, right? So how you deal with conflict is, first you go to the person who you have an issue with, right? Try to reconcile with him. And if that doesn't work, then you slowly but surely move it up the chain of command, as it were, because the church is structured, you know. So go to the guy, try to reason between each other as brothers. If it doesn't work, go to the elder, then go to the pastor, then so on and so forth, and you take it up. You know, much like the legal system, you start at the small courts until you go all the way up to the highest courts in the land. And so it's a similar sort of process, right? And they're all telling me that I should have done this. You should have privately messaged. And I said to them simply, I said, then why didn't he do it with this guy? Right? And they're like, oh, because public public sins should be publicly rebuked. Okay. And this is the sheer hypocrisy. This is where the absence of logic, it becomes so stark, right? Because they're telling me to do something that the pastor himself flat out refused to do, right? And then when I say, well, why didn't he do the same thing? Then they had a different standard, because the Bible also says, and it's true, public things that are done in public should be publicly rebuked. So, for example, the Apostle Paul, when Peter was busy messing around, we all know, when Peter was busy messing around and being a little bit of a coward with the Jews and stuff like that, sort of bending on certain rules and kind of stuff, Paul took him to task in public. He didn't go through this chain of command, you know. He took him to task. He's like, Peter, you're being an idiot, and you are leading, and you are being such an idiot that you are even leading the other disciples astray, because you are not towing the line. Took him to task in public. Right? So here's how the cult of personality is infiltrating our churches, right, and our institutions. Not only in the secular world is it happening with your politicians, right? Like at the moment, Trump. There's such a personality cult surrounding Donald Trump at the moment, is unbelievable, right? Personality cult surrounding Al Gore, surrounding anyone who is an icon of Black Lives Matters or feminism, or all of these isms that bring out these fanatical, all on, you know, you either this or you're the devil kind of thing, right? And it's coming into the churches as well at this exact same time, coming into the churches, and no one, and they and to keep you in line, right? To keep you in line, they come in and they wipe you out. That brings me to my fourth, not my fourth, my third point. My fourth point, right? Anti-logic, harsh rules, and unrealistic standards. Okay, so highly punitive. If you shoot the sacred cow, you get crucified. Okay, there's no middle ground and stuff like that. Now here's how the cult gets you in. The cult preaches a very nice, very loving message. We're gonna look after you. We're gonna look after you. We love you so much. It's all about love. Don't be so hateful. Don't be so hateful. Does this language sound familiar? Don't be so hateful. We love, right? Everyone, all love for everything. Why don't we just love each other? Love each other. And what they do to get you in is they like throw like love grenades at you, basically. They bathe you in love and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you look at the kind of people that join cults, they are generally, so this whole anti-logic thing, right? Anyone who's anyone who's intelligent, well-rounded, etc., will immediately have a problem. Will be like, hang on, this is a bit of an issue. Even though there are ways to snare the intellectuals, right? For example, even though I said they're very anti-logic, you also get cults of logic, right? Which is your scientism, your naturalism, your Darwinism, and all that kind of stuff. Your Richard Dawkins type people, right? You're very, what's that other guy? All these guys that basically are like, well, you know, globalism, we're the intellectual elite, and we're just gonna population control everyone, kill everyone. You know, Georgia Guidestones, bring the whole world, kill 90% of people, because, you know, who cares, right? Sort of thing. So you have cults of reason and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, right? So, for example, you will find the Enlightenment again was a cult of reason, okay? Or Lady Liberty, reason, and all that kind of stuff. Same thing there, right? And they think they're being reasonable, but what they're actually doing is they're psyching up the emotional So if you look at these people like Richard Dawkins and all these kinds of stuff, a lot of the rhetoric is very, very emotional. They like to give this pretense of being very, very intellectual and very cerebral and all that kind of stuff. But you can see these guys like Richard Dawkins, that guy, he doesn't just disagree, because when you see an atheist who merely disagrees with religion, right, you'll find the guy is generally quite chilled. He's like, yeah, you have your religion, I have mine, who cares? But these new atheist types, they hate religion. There's a lot more going, but it's not just, oh, because I intellectually came to the conclusion. No, right? They have an emotional problem with the religion that they got, what that they're going after. There's more to it there, right? I wouldn't be surprised if people, if someone like Richard Dawkins was actually abused when they were kids, probably abused by a church person or something like that. There's a lot more going on there, right? So even the cults of reason don't actually really bring about a very reasonable person. They bring out a fanatic who believes he's very reasonable, who believes he's very rational, but is actually very, very emotionally unstable. And so as a result, right, in order to keep the people in line, they're highly, highly punitive. If you step out of line, if you question, if you whatever, it's you done. You're done. They take you out, right? They completely take you out. It's highly, highly punitive, and very, very rarely does the punishment fit the crime, right? It's a completely overblown thing, absolutely, utterly overblown thing. Um, and do you see this in the world today? Absolutely. Try questioning feminism. Try questioning the Black Lives Matter narrative. Try questioning any leftist narrative in the world today and see what happens to you. And conversely, on the other side, let's say you're dealing with a conservative, right? Conservative, they conserve nothing, but you're dealing with a conservative. Try questioning capitalism and see what happens to you. Okay. Um, try questioning Donald Trump and see what happens to you, right? Um, they're not, admittedly, they're not quite as bad as what the leftists have become, all right? Because there's still some semblance of decency there for the moment, at least. Who knows? Maybe once they get the upper hand, once they become the really dominant force in the world, because nationalism and stuff is rising at the moment. Nationalism is state nationalism, right? There's nothing intrinsically wrong with nationalism, but at the moment, the current nationalistic trend in the world is actually a cover for what is actually statism, right? Where the political leader is the god, is the god man sort of thing, right? Um, so where was I going with this? Sorry. So they're very, very punitive, and if you question and all that kind of stuff, it's a big problem. So yeah, I said at the moment, because the left has got, at the moment, the left narrative, the far left narrative has got the upper hand in the media and all that sort of thing. The conservatives are maybe a little bit more docile at the moment, but who knows if that's going to stay that way once nationalism and all this statism becomes fully entrenched and becomes the dominant force and the dominant narrative in the world. I very, very much doubt that they're going to be as calm and collected and reserved and as rational as they currently pretend to be. I very, very much doubt it. Once the pendulum swings all the way to the right, I don't see them remaining all chilled out and very, very nice, and all that sort of thing. So extremely punitive. And feminists, a lot of feminists have actually found this out. So, for example, let me give you an example of a young lady here. Oh, good grief! Let me just quickly find her. I think this is her name. Ah, here we go. Here we go. So here's this young lady. Right. This young lady. Her name is Cassie J. And she used to be a feminist, right? But then what happened is, and she's only one of many, many young ladies who have cottoned on to what feminism is really actually all about. Um, and there's another lady. Let me get another lady here. Here we go. Another lady. She's pretty cool, actually. I kind of like her. Right. Bettina Arndt and Cassie J. So these two ladies, right? So this woman has actually never ever been duped, as far as I'm aware. She's always seen feminism for what it is. As far as I'm aware, she might have been different when she was younger, because you find, interestingly enough, there are a lot of most feminists are young, right? Which is at the age at which people are the most brainless, right? So men and women are at their most brainless when they're in their 20s, and so on and so forth. And once we hit the age of 30, we start chilling out. And once we start working and get a family and we become more responsible and less idiotic, we then realize, maybe the world is not quite what we thought it was, and they start having a little bit more respect. So this lady here specifically, so feminism is all about woman power. Woman power, they pretend, they say, right? They say woman power, okay? Now, power to the woman, and as far as they're concerned, women must have respect the way men do. They must be able to have their own opinions and their own thoughts. And there's all this propaganda. So there's that propaganda again, where they bring you in by bombing you with love and all that kind of stuff. Love, oh, wonderful love, okay? And then later on, if you don't toe the line, they take you out. Cassie J actually developed a documentary and all that kind of stuff, because she used to be a feminist, and then one day she woke up and she's like, whoa, feminism is actually a really, really, really toxic ideology, right? Toxic femininity, right? This ideology is actually quite evil. And this other lady, Bettina Arndt, and many others, right, have gone very, very public and said this feminism, we need to get rid of, we need to stop this feminist stuff. Now, all of a sudden, feminists forget their ethics, right? They forget their ethics, they behave completely contrary to their ethics, and they completely demolish these women, right? Now, if they're really all for women having a voice and voicing their own opinions, right, then why is it that they've so viciously attacked and even send death threats? They send death threats and stuff like that. They dox these women. So doxing is when they release all your personal private information to the public. So the address, your phone number, your address, the address of your family, where your children go to school, things like that. So that all of these fanatical maniacs can go and find you and harass you. So because they know where you live, so they go and graffiti your house and things like that, throw rocks. That's what these people are like, right? And that's how you know you're in a cult, okay? All of these social justice movements, every last one of them behave like a cult. Every last one of them. And it is exactly the same whether you see social justice out in the world or whether you see social justice even in the church. It is exactly the same way. You try, even in my church, you try and question the doctrine of social justice even in my church, and you're going to see what happens to you. Because they immediately, oh, but the Bible told us to love and told us to love. And you hear that, right? One thing Christians that I think to a large degree, they're fed to the teeth. Here to here, right? They're fed up. All you ever hear Christians say these days, oh, the love of Jesus, oh, the love. Why don't we just preach the love of Jesus? And as soon as you even look like you're going to be critical or preach something that's a bit harsh or give some really, really strong, meaty doctrine, oh, no, why don't we just preach the love of Jesus? It's this emotional, sentimental, pathetic garbage. right? Utter garbage, as if the love of Jesus is the only thing in the Bible. Why don't we just preach the love of Jesus? And and even the music is sickening, right? You have these people like these Hillsong people, and oh man, what's her name? There's a whole bunch of others. The whole Christian pop music scene, where what you're beginning to see, right? Because if you look at the gurus in the Hindu, in the Hare Krishna movement, and you see the way the women look at the gurus, right? And how they virtually worship the guru, right? And there's this erotic tie, right? And often there's some really, really like sordid, kinky stuff going on in the background. But when the guru walks past, these women look like they swoon. They look like they're about to have an orgasm, right? As the guru walks past. And you see the exact same demented garbage, right? This emotional incontinence, right? In a lot of the Christian gospel music, because the way these women are singing, a lot of them, it says it's like they think Jesus is their boyfriend. The way they carry on, I love you, this, and you listen to the stuff and you think, what the hell is what the heck is going on? And they are literally going around, a lot of them, taking secular music, modifying it, giving Christian lyrics, right, as if that makes a difference, right? Because the music is still carries the erotic tone to it. Just because you Christianize it doesn't change that the music itself has got an erotic tone to it. So you've got this this strange eroticism, this theo-eroticism going into the music as well. And everyone is swooning and stuff, and you see these people in the church, we love Jesus, and they really, it's like they really look like, you walk into the church sometimes and you think, is everyone lost their minds? Are they all it's not proper worship in the sense where you have reverence. There's a difference between reverence and respect and being humble versus swooning like a lovesick imbecile, right? Where it looks like you're about to wet your pants in any moment, right? Over what's going on. And it's this constant emotional incontinence. And it's not that Christianity does not have a place for emotion, because emotions enrich our lives. There is a place for it, right? But it's become nothing but emotion. Nothing but emotion. And one of the dangers of it becoming emotional is that if you speak against it, right, the love of Jesus and the this and this, if you speak against what's going on, the social justice doctrine, if you speak against it at all, then one of the attacks is they attack you. Oh, how can you be against love, right? These straw man, idiotic. How can you be against love? How can you be so harsh? How can you be so hateful? How can you be so this and this and this? And that's how it is. I've actually had, even in my denomination, there was another preacher who was talking absolute garbage, and I said to him, I said, now his message was fine, the message itself was fine, but again, there's this tendency, right? Again, there's this tendency where if it preaches well, I'll say it, even if the facts are wrong, right? Even if the facts are wrong, even if I have to stretch the truth a little bit, who cares, right? There's this ends justify the means philosophy, where if it preaches well, then I'll preach it, right? And I called a pastor on it also in public. I said, dude, this is wrong. Immediately, his first response, oh, don't be so hateful. Straight away, immediately I knew exactly what I was dealing with, right? You're dealing with a social justice warrior, right? And when I actually investigated the pastor further, I found out this guy is social justice warrior through and through, right? And even the way, his style of preaching and all that kind of stuff, there's jumping around, and it's just like, what are you doing, kind of thing. And immediately, oh, why do other Christians have to hate on us who are trying to do a good work and all that? And I said, brother, I'm perfectly, your message, I understand your message, the message itself was sound, was cool, but I said, you have no excuse to stretch the truth here and there, and go with it just because it preaches well. The ends do not justify the means in Christianity, right? And you rile the people up and get the emotions going and all that. It's just, it's ridiculous, right? And again, if you dare to speak out, they obliterate you. They become absolutely harsh, completely unrealistic standards. And this actually goes on to my fifth point as well. Anyway, highly emotional, complete and utter emotional incontinence with people. The standards are utterly unrealistic as well a lot of the time, so that you also constantly feel in a perpetual state of absolute guilt. And you find this a lot with the environmentalists, where it's this constant guilt, this constant ridiculous standard, and you have to self-flagellate. And you see this, right, with the whole social justice rhetoric. It's like, at the moment, white men can do nothing right. The only, as today, in the world today, white men, unless they self-flagellate from dawn to dusk like the Opus Dei, no one is satisfied. No one is satisfied. They have these absurd standards that go out that are just so ridiculous, so utterly ridiculous, that it's unbelievable. But then in practice, in their own lives, completely contradict their own narratives, right? And you find this in cults. In cults, very completely give you, like you saw it a lot in monasticism, a lot as well, where you completely give up. Like in Christianity, God created the world and created joy and created pleasure and all these kinds. You're supposed to enjoy living. You're supposed to enjoy. So these unrealistic there's this legalism, right? It's all about the rules, and if you cross this line here, and it basically makes life untenable, completely and utterly untenable, right? It's ridiculous. And now, one thing to notice, right, is that the reason why we find ourselves in the world today is because here's the thing: the harsh rules and the unrealistic standards, right, and when the person is emotionally incontinent. What this indicates, this is a sign of an abused individual. Okay, so we're actually talking about, at this moment, we're talking about. A lot of people have heard about MK Ultra, mind control, all this kind of stuff, PSYOPs, and all these kinds of things that the government, the CIA, secret societies and stuff, that they use upon the population in order to break people down. So this is how it works, right? And this is how any conditioning of any kind works. Any kind of conditioning, right? Is you break down the individual, you abuse the individual, you remove their system of beliefs, you give them a doubt. First of all, you give them a doubt in everything that they believe, right? So that they doubt absolutely everything. You completely demolish them so that they're just a husk of an individual, no beliefs, no nothing. Now here's the thing: the new atheist movement, atheism itself, is designed to do that, right? A lot of people think that atheism was a logical conclusion of being a rational intellectual person. That is absolute garbage. Atheism was designed to make people doubt every single thing that they believe. Atheism was designed to turn the individual person into a skeptic who is forever skeptical and uncertain about absolutely everything, is never certain about anything. And you listen to people like Peter Hitchens, listen to people like Richard Dawkins, even Sam Harrison, and a lot of these other people. They condemn anyone who is certain about anything. And that's one of the criticisms they have about religious people, where they say, I remember Christopher Hitchens saying it, is like, as soon as someone claims certainty about anything, you should, and this and this is how retarded it is, right? Christopher Hitchens is like, as soon as someone claims to be certain about anything, you should immediately be suspicious, right? And it's like, excuse me, Mr. Hitchens, are you sure about are you certain about that, by the way? Right? So it's it's idiotic. So, and this is how this mind altering thing. So you break You make them doubt absolutely everything, and this is what's happened. And this has happened in the Christian. It's specifically in the Christian West. Everyone doubts absolutely everything, so they're completely vulnerable. It's almost like like if you look at a hypnotist, and a hypnotist tells you to open yourself up, allow you to feel your emotions, allow, you know, give up all preconceptions. That's how the hypnotist starts breaking you down. That hypnotic induction, right? They call it. Doubt everything. And this is what atheism was meant to do. Atheism was not designed to last, by the way, because even now we are seeing people who used to be atheists shifting slowly but surely into strange spiritual beliefs. And a perfect example of this is no one other. Have a look at this, right? He is the guru, the current guru of the nations. The modern, oh, come on. There we go. The modern guru, or the guru of our immediate times. Have a look at him. Can you guess who he is? Can you guess who he is? Jordan Peterson. You just have to listen to this guy. Right. Now, some people take him apart completely, but I kind of like him. I've got a love-hate relationship with the guy. But every single thing that Jordan Peterson promotes that is not based in actual researched psychology, right? Some of which he gets a little bit wrong, but for the most part, okay, personality traits and stuff like that, it's great stuff. Okay? But everything outside of that, when Jordan Peterson starts becoming philosophical, when Jordan Peterson gets into philosophy, he starts talking about mythology and archetypes and all this kind of stuff. What people have not realized is that Jordan Peterson is offering a secular religion, a secular mythology to the people, right? Atheism was meant to come in to cause people to doubt everything, and to strip all meaning from the world. And you listen to a lot of the atheists, that they will tell you that we are determined, we're just biological, everything is ultimately meaningless, there's no objective moral reality, there's no objective good and bad. That's all occult, okay? It's not that they got that from there's religions that have existed that have always believed that, okay? That's nothing new, okay? And these atheists think they're so enlightened. It's like the pagans figured that out, thought that before you did. All you've done is inherit the same thinking, believing that you're not religious, right? Stripped everything away, and now people, the whole world, the family's fallen apart, okay? And this is what happens. So you strip people's belief systems completely, leave them completely psychologically, philosophically, emotionally exposed, right? Then you abuse them, abuse the hell out of them, right? You literally break their spirits. You break their spirits. How does the world do this, right? And the cults, this is what cults do, okay? Through being very, very harsh, very stringent, and often a cult leader will instigate what is called a false flag situation, where so for example, the cult leader will be in his compound or whatever, and then there will be an explosion somewhere, and oh, look, those people are trying to get us, okay? Look at that, right? And so the people are become sort of they're already completely sort of vulnerable. And this is the thing, this is generally speaking, very low IQ, very vulnerable, emotionally damaged people are usually the ones that end up in cults and stuff like that, right? Cults cannot survive with strong individuals, right? You have the cult leader who is himself a strong, though unstable individual, but it's weak, emotionally damaged people that get involved and are attracted to cults because there's no meaning, they're demolished, they need something to fulfill that hole, that gap in their souls. So there's an abuse, there's false flag, there's all kinds of things, right? And you see in a lot of cults, there's a lot of physical and emotional, even though they are pretending, oh, we love you very much, we love, but there's a lot of emotional blackmail and all that kind of stuff that goes on. There's a lot of psychological and emotional abuse, if not right, if not outright sexual and physical abuse and stuff like that. So now, how has the world? So atheism came in, strip mind all meaning from the world and all beliefs from the world. And as a result, the family unit fell apart, relationships between men and women have fallen apart, relationships between different ethnic groups have completely fallen apart, because believe it or not, the relationship between whites and blacks 50 years ago was better than what it is now, for example. Okay. um and you abuse the people through what? You fear tactics, right? So you've got the media. A lot of the violent movie, people are like, oh, violent movies, you know, it's going to make someone go and shoot up something like that. No, violent movies are designed to traumatize you, not to turn you into a serial killer. Okay, the violence and the sheer horror and stuff like that that's going on in a movie is designed to actually designed to traumatize you. Okay, the same thing with the news. The news, there was a war here and a horrible thing there. So you whether through social media and all these kinds of things, you are constantly getting harassed by news of all of these terrible, horrible polemics going on all over the place. All this, oh, how terrible, right? And the person and the person is basically emotionally harassed, emotionally strung out, and is basically abused. And what happens is, then you have, because of the whole secular ethic and all that kind of nonsense, right? All decency or everything is ripped out. All the objective moral categories are gone. So the family unit falls apart. When the family unit falls apart, the safety that can be found in the family is no longer there. So the family members start abusing each other. The stepmother abuses, the stepfather abuses, the children abuse each other, the world, and then those broken people go out and they abuse other people as well. So we get bullied in the school, we get bullied in the streets, we get bullied on the news, we get bullied on social media, we get bullied and abused, and you're broken down to the point where you're like this quivering mass, this quivering mass of despair. And that's what you see. You have these, look at the evil people there, they're trying to get you, beware. And that's what you hear. Feminism does that. Oh, the patriarchy is going to get you, they want to enslave you, they want to kill you. Same thing with the blacks, right? The blacks are constantly being told, look, the white man, he wants to enslave you again, he's evil, look, watch him, you know. And the black population, especially in the United States, in large, are so emotionally strung out because the war on poverty has done more to advance poverty than anything else. It's actually kept them in poverty, right? We should really feel sorry for the blacks in the United States, man. Let me tell you, you got to feel sorry for those people. And so they've been completely harassed. So things were finally starting to slowly but surely go better, and then everything just took a wrong turn. You can listen to people like there's a gentleman called Thomas Sowell, right? Great guy. Let me pull his picture. Let me pull his picture up for you here. He was a decent guy. I don't agree with everything, but you know, he was a good guy. All right, let's have a look. Let's have a look at him here. Thomas Sowell. You guys will, you know, you'll see him and you'll know who he is straight away. All right, let's have a look at the bloke. Oh, that's a rub. Come on, I need live. Well, there we go. There's a nice big decent, because I don't want to pixelate it when. So here we go. Here's this gentleman, Thomas Sowell, right? And you hear if you hear black men of his age speak, right? There's a few other guys speak about what it was like for them when they were younger. They actually had better education. Their lives were better when they were young than what the situation for blacks is now. It's like, for all of the social justice warrior, leftist, war on poverty garbage that's going on, for some strange reason blacks are actually worse off than what they were before, and they've been so harassed by their saviors, because you get these saviors, right? These opportunists, right? What's his name? What's that? There's a one guy, man. You get these black leaders who set themselves up as these spokesmen for the black community, who all they do is harass and push forward this narrative of, look, they're going to get you. So the black population at large, they struggle a lot because their families are broken, so they're getting abused at home. The schools are dysfunctional, they're getting abused at school. The streets are dysfunctional, they're getting abused and shot and killed in the streets by each other, more than what white people are actually doing to them, right? By each other more than anything else, right? So they're actually self-perpetuating in many ways their own abuse, right? There's no fathers in the home and stuff, and you see that in the Latino community as well, right? My community, the Latino community, you see the same thing. If you go to Brazil, where I was born, see the same thing there. Exact same thing there in my people there. Same thing is going on. It's all fallen apart, right? And we're extremely violent, man. Brazil, we're competing, man. We're competing for crime. Let me tell you. My uncles, they tell me about, how they shots firing, and it's ridiculous, sort of thing. And when your life is stripped of meaning, and you're willing to accept any, you're ready and willing to accept any savior, right? Anyone who comes along and is going to be a savior, he's going to save me, he's going to help me, he's going to bring me justice, he's going to help lift me from the ashes, people. And that's how that's how it sets it up. And not only do cult leaders do that, right? But at the moment, what we call the deep state, right? Your the globalists are doing that to people at the moment, so that, because what they're going to do is they create the problem. This is thesis, antithesis. They create the problem, and then they come in like white knights riding on a horse and say, "We will save you." And that's why these people. So if you look, for example, at like, let's take the most common ones, feminism and Black Lives Matter. Rather than turn, and you see this in cults as well, right? Rather than turn to your parents, to your family and your friends for help and security and to build community in the family, no, who do you turn to? You turn to the guru, you turn to the politician, you turn to the state. The state becomes a surrogate, right? Or not a surrogate. The state takes the place of the family, takes the place of the father, of the mother, of the just the decency, right? The state begins to dictate, like the state itself. So a guru is not, this whole concept doesn't only work for one crazy fanatic out there leading a gang of 100 people, right? The same principle works because human beings were emotional and psychological creatures. The same thing works whether it's one guy with 100 people or whether it is a state over 300 million people. It's exactly the same thing. It's why the education system has been dumbed down, because they don't want logical, educated people. It's why in a lot of churches, they don't teach elevated doctrine. They don't teach philosophy. They don't teach logic. It's all emotional. It's all emotional. It's all illogical. It's all irrational, right? And if you dare to question the narrative, if you dare to question anything, they become extremely punitive. They harass you. They want to kick you out. They want to tell you that you're evil. I cannot tell you how many times I wanted to say something, right? Because let me tell you, I've been a board member in various churches, right? So the church elects a board, right? And then the board sort of manages the church affairs and stuff. I've been a member of a board. I've had leadership roles in the churches. I've been youth leader. I've been religious liberties leader. I've been all sorts of things, right? Every single time every time, without fail, when I see something that is wrong and I speak out about it, no matter how I do it, I get shut down. Every time. They pay me lip service. Yes, 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 yes. And nothing happens. Nothing happens, and I get shut down. Or I get strawmanned. They're like, oh, but we mustn't be harsh. It's like, I'm not saying that we must be harsh. Because this is the thing. And again, it happened just the other day. It happened just the other day. When I spoke about something, and I said, this is wrong. And we should do this and this and this. And this is how we can fix it. These are the things. Immediately, oh, but we mustn't be harsh. Oh, but we must be loving. Oh, it's like, really? Really? Wow, what a revelation. I was proposing on taking a baseball bat and a machine gun and going around and threatening everyone. That's what I was planning to do. Really? You don't think that by now I know that we must be loving and gentle and kind? Sort of thing. But then that's the thing, they get into this rhetoric, right? And that's the emotional incontinence, stupidity, and the cowardice, because they don't want to face the issues, right? Because, oh, but we must be loving, and it's like, yes, I know, but that's where it stops. It doesn't go from there. It's a red herring. It's a red herring that takes you away from the original conversation, the original discussion. That you get tangled up in stupidity, in nonsense, in irrelevant garbage, and then the issue goes nowhere. The issue goes nowhere. And a lot of people are doing this without even realizing it. Because a lot of Christians have been secularized. They think they're Christian, but they have the mindset of the world. They don't have the mindset of a Christian. They've got the mindset of the world, and this is how the world is behaving. The world has influenced the mind of Christians left, right, and center. And that's why the Christian churches are falling apart. That's why our churches are going nowhere. They're failing. And people complain, and they complain, and they complain, and it goes nowhere. Nothing changes. Right? Nothing changes. I know churches because I grew up in the church, but then I became an atheist. And then I came back to the church much, much later in life. Churches that I've known for years and years and stuff like that, right? The problems that they had 20 years ago, they still have today. There's another church that I joined. The problems that they had 9-10 years ago, they still have the same problems. Exactly the same problems. Exactly. To the letter. But if you bring that up, they get emotionally offended, and they become defensive, and you get nowhere with them. You get absolutely nowhere with them, and they just make excuses. That's how you know. When you involved not necessarily in a cult, but you are dealing with a cult-like mentality, where the people have like the Bible says, that our minds have been seared by false ideas and false doctrines and false whatever, rather than being strong, consistent, godly people that have our emotions in balance, that have our rationality in balance, and we have a balance between the two, and we move forward. None of that's happening. None of that's happening. Why? Because as Christians, we're watching television, we're listening to secular music and all that kind of stuff. You know, how many times the pastor has to tell people in the congregation, please read your Bibles. Please study your faith. And most Christians know nothing. They know nothing about their faith. Highly, highly, highly emotionally incontinent. They respond with the emotions first. I remember this one time I was giving a lecture or an afternoon program in a church. I go around, that's what I do. I was giving a lecture about how the media influences us, and how the media portrays, because everyone's fully aware of how the media portrays black people, for example, that the media tends to portray them as violent and gangster and all these kinds of things. But let me tell you, I brought this up in church. The topic was about how media right? The movies, music, and all that stuff is designed like this whole MK Ultra, this whole mind control, social engineering things. I was explaining about how the media targets us. And what a lot of people don't realize is the media doesn't only target black people, it targets white people, right? There's different kinds of media for each race, because the races actually are different. So you find generally black people like X and white people like Y, and the way that they abuse the minds of the people, the media targets them individually. And I was then showing statistically. So here's a statistic, right? Think about black oriented music, right? Your rap and music and all that kind of stuff, right? It's either rap or R&B. The R&B is hypersexual. It's hypersexual. And the rap music is hyper-violent, gangster. So what do you have? You have a proliferation of illegitimate children and abortions within the black community, fatherlessness, and you have a proliferation of violent crime in black communities. Conversely, if you look at white people, they like their rock, their metal, or all these kinds of things, right? If you pay attention to the lyrics are very, very much about, how can you say, are very, very obsessed with death, there's a lot of melancholy, right? Rock music, right? The type that white people generally listen to. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of melancholy. There's a lot of death. There's death obsession, suicide, and all that kind of stuff. And if you look at white people are committing suicide at rates that blacks are not. And people wonder, I wonder why this is, right? Because if white people are better off economically, right, then why are they the ones committing suicide and it's not black people this is why, because the different stuff appeals to the different races. Why that is the case, who knows, right? But self-mutilation, cutting, eating disorders, all that kind of stuff is prolific within the white population. Prolific. Utterly prolific. And this is how they are abusing. They target each group, and then they tell blacks that must fear whites, and they tell white people, go and fear the blacks, right? And so the two are so busy fighting each other that they don't realize that both of them are being taken for fools, that they're being emotionally abused, and their entire being is being stripped down. So that when the state offers you a new religion, offers you a new thing, and that's what people like Jordan Peterson and these guys are offering, which is why they're so. You need to understand, suddenly you don't hear about the new atheists so much. They're gone. Now all of a sudden it's Jordan Peterson, out of nowhere, talking about mythology and archetypes, and he's doing these lectures about the Bible, and he's getting literally thousands of people attending his biblical lectures. The guy doesn't know a damn thing about Christianity. Nothing, right? What Jordan Peter is teaching is occultism and Gnosticism. That's what he's teaching, right? That is what he's teaching. And people are lapping it up because they are longing, right? He even wrote a book, Maps of Meaning. Here's a man that is pretending to offer people meaning, the antidote to what? To chaos. The whole... Occultists are absolutely obsessed with order and chaos. Order and chaos. What does the Illuminati... What does the Illuminati and the Freemasons, what do they say? Order out of chaos. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this psychologist, and he's got 12 rules for life, an antidote to chaos. Come on. He's using the same damn language, right? Here's the new guru. Jordan Peterson is the new guru of the new kind of religion, because atheism has failed. It's left people bereft. It gave them nothing. It stripped mind all meaning. So did the New Age movement, right? The New Age movement was sponsored by the UN, the United Nations, by the occultists and all that kind of stuff. It didn't work. particularly well because it was a little bit too, you know. But I was actually, I think, actually, I'm wrong. The New Age movement worked perfectly because the New Age movement soaked up whoever, everyone that atheism didn't soak up. All right. So it did because the New Age movement was so wishy-washy and self-referential, much like atheism is, very relativistic, constantly being skeptical, and believe virtually anything, no matter how ridiculous, right? That the New Age movement, rather than offer people something, all it did was actually strip people of all meaning, even though they thought that they were being given meaning. They would try to find meaning in like tarot cards and crystals and all that garbage. And a lot of people have come away and be like, this is, and so that's why people like Jordan Peterson are very, very, very powerful. This is the next phase, in the global cult movement, right? Because the globalists, right? The globalists are not atheists. The globalists are not secular. The globalists are occultists. They are occultists, right? Freemasonry, da, da, da. It's all seems on the surface very atheistic, but this is all very, very Luciferian. This is all very, very satanic. This is all very, very occult, right? And Jordan Peterson, I mean, come on, he's talking about Carl Jung, right? It doesn't get much more occult and Gnostic than that, okay? I mean, not that Carl Jung never had a good idea ever in his life, okay, sort of thing, but on the whole, that's what the drive, that's what's underpinning all of it, you know. And this idea that, you know, when you ask Jordan Peterson, what do you mean by God, is like, well, that depends what you mean by God. As soon as someone is that, because here's the thing, right? When you speak to a guru and you ask them a direct question, what do? They chase their own tails, right? They never give you a straight answer. And that's one thing you actually get with Jordan Peterson. It's well, that depends what you mean by God and all that. And then he wants to tell you, is like, I don't know if there is a God, but I act as if he does exist. It's like, no, you don't. That's garbage. That's ridiculous. Sort of, and that's what you're finding. It's this abuse, and that's what you find everywhere you go. And that's why people are suffering from anxiety, depression, eating disorders are skyrocketing. Absolutely, everyone and his dog these days is on antidepressants. And if they're not on antidepressants, they're overeating because they're trying to eat their emotions, right? By eating junk, by eating rubbish, fast foods, and all that kind of stuff. And if they're not doing that, then they're on drugs, or they're on alcohol, or sex. They're addicted. They're addicted to something, and everyone is running out there making idols and gods of. There's a series. I don't know if I should recommend it, but it's a series called American Gods, and how they portray if you understand it's exactly what's going on today. Now, they do such a good job with that film. It's an excellent piece of modern propaganda and mind control and stuff like that. It's unbelievable what they've done. It's called American Gods. If you're a Christian, you shouldn't really be watching that kind of stuff. So I admit that I'm sort of contradicting myself a little, because I have watched it, and I'm curious to, maybe I'm rationalizing, I don't know, but I'm curious to see, because they're putting everything into the media. That's how they're educating. That's how they're educating people. Right. So point number 6, right? They're obsessed with money. Absolutely, absolutely obsessed with money. That's how you know you're involved in a cult. That's how you know there's a problem. Obsessed with money, right? Give me money. Give me money. So, you know, like with the Hare Krishnas and stuff like that, give up all your money, give it to the guru, so that the guru can drive around 12 can own 12 limousines, right? And so on and so forth. Same thing with Al Gore, right? Oh, the world is going to end. What? Global warming. What's the solution? Give me money so that I can take that money and give it to my friends over here so that they can do scientific research, right? So they always throw around this, the religion, the secular religion, so that they can do science. They'll do science over here, right? So we're going to do some science, right? And we're going to figure out the way, right? Science is the new theology. We're going to do some science, you see. And there's all these scientists who agree that we should do some science to find a scientific solution to this issue. But we can only do that if you give us an obscene amount of money, right? And when we fail miserably, don't ask us what we did with the money. Because I tell you, this whole environmentalist global warming movement, I mean, there was a whole bunch of companies and corporations that were set up to tackle climate change. They all failed. A lot of them failed, and that money gone, right? And here's the problem with science. This science is funded by the state. Science, you need to get this into your mind. All these people, especially if you're atheist, you're like, oh, science, science. Science is funded by the state. Science is not being run, is not being dictated by honest individuals who are genuinely seeking for the truth. No, science is funded by the state, therefore it's coercion. You do not get money out of the state if you do not say, please, Mr. Politician, may I have some money? And the politician will be like, why should I give you money? And the only way you get money is if you tell Mr. Politician what he wants to hear, and you research what Mr. Politician thinks you should be researching. Okay? That's why science may have been a good thing once upon a time, but science these days is totally perverted, right? So I forget who said it, but I've been reading past 2 or 3 or 4 years, there's been what they call the replication crisis, which has affected biological sciences, the humanities, and stuff like that the most. They're the most hard hit. But basically what they found is, in general, 50% or less of all scientific papers cannot be reproduced. So in other words, this science at the moment is no more reliable than a flip of the coin. 50-50. Okay? That should open your eyes a little bit. Okay? I'm not saying that science is bad. I love science. Science is great. You know, I'm an engineer. I wouldn't have a job if it weren't for some of the scientific understanding we have of the world, and so on and so forth, right? In fact, when science grows up, it becomes engineering, by the way. Okay? So engineering is the daddy of sciences, right? Which is why we were able to build pyramids and things like that long before anyone even knew what science was, okay? And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Oh, you know, peer review papers, peer review. I want your peer review paper. It's like, listen, when science becomes legitimate, it turns into engineering, because then it can actually be useful. Okay? It can actually be used to actually do something in the real world. It can actually become useful. When any scientific inquiry or whatever, when it becomes legitimate, it becomes engineering. Okay? It's like, if it's not a branch of engineering yet, then treat it with a pinch of salt. Like you should do with Darwinism, by the way. Right? Because when you try to actually apply Darwinism to the real world, it fails completely. Completely fails. Whether you're trying to do computer models, whether you try to apply the mathematical statistics to it, it fails. Which is why they never mention these things at all, ever. Right? It's all rhetoric. It's all rhetoric. Okay. And the reason why the Darwinistic view has to be in place, by the way, the people who started Darwinism were all a bunch of occultists as well, is because it gives you a secular naturalistic mythology so that you have grounds to reject God and all that kind of stuff, which people are fast abandoning, by the way. People are, people are beginning to doubt Darwinism, and I predict that within the next 10 years, it's going to be significantly more prevalent, right? Once its main proponents die off a little bit. Because that's how science, that's how, here's the thing, a lot of people think that science progresses because we uncover evidence. No, science progresses because the people who hold dogmas die out so that the new generation can have their own ideas, and then science progresses past that generation only once that generation dies out so that the next generation can push forward their ideas, right? So science doesn't advance in the way sort of so it's always about money. All right, so that's the sixth point. Money. Give us money. Give me money. Give up everything. Give me money. It's and you they always need more. Always need more money. All right. And this is different from a regular established faith, because, for example, in Christendom in general, it says only give 10%. That's it. They never ask for more or less. And if you give any more, it's out of your own will, free will. And the difference is with Christianity, there's charities, you've got to pay for the past, so you know where the money's going. If your church is not transparent about its finances, you should immediately be very, very suspicious, because one of the main factors of how you know you're probably dealing with a cult is if they're not transparent about where the money is going. All right. So in a lot of ways, atheists have full right to be suspicious about many religious organizations that rake in billions, right? Which are, tax-free sort of thing. And I'm not saying churches should be taxed, but, we should be looking at certain things. But then the hypocrites, they never question what the government does with the money. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, the state, wonderful. Well, not all. I must be fair. Not all atheists. In fact, atheists are sort of It seems like they're tending towards anarcho-capitalism, right? It seems like atheists are finally becoming suspicious of the state, sort of thing. Although, unfortunately, when they promote anarcho-capitalism, I tend to find that even though they're rightfully suspicious of the state, the fact that they want anarchism kind of means that they're not sufficiently suspicious of human nature, right? So, yeah, very, very obsessed with money, and it's ridiculous. Here's an interesting thing, right? Again, coming into the churches, I know of a church because I've got family in South Africa, right? And my family, my mother's a Seventh-day Adventist and all that kind of stuff as well. So this is a church. I'm using an example from my own denomination, where someone who's running a church down there is going against the church's teachings. But you can see how these this cult of personality cults can infiltrate any church, right? So there is a church down there being run by a gentleman who's actually a British guy, and he happens to be black, so he's untouchable, basically, right? Because if you say anything, then, well, you're racist, okay? Right? Which is beautiful, right? It's beautiful. If it works, kudos to them if we're stupid enough to allow them to get away with it, right? And what they've been teaching in that church, right, is that if you return more tithe, all right, it's so stupid. If you give more, so the tithe is 10%, okay? If you return more than that, we promise you will get a blessing. And if you don't have a blessing, right, if you don't have a blessing by the end of 3 months, we will return that extra money. We will return to you that extra money that you gave us. Hello, right? Guess what? This church is becoming a cult, is becoming a cult church, right? One of our high ups needs to go into that church and clean house. And yeah, I'm constantly getting news from people. Oh, Morgan, this is happening in my church, and that is happening in my church, and the next thing is happening in my church. Not only in my church, not even in the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, but in all of them. Right? Recently, a massive sex abuse scandal in the Baptist in the Baptist union up out in the United States. So, and that's it, because we're not. If you have a proliferation of, if Christians are allow themselves to degenerate and apostatize, this is what's going to happen. So you've got it, and they immediately become money grubbing, become very, very money grubbing. If your church promises or suggests or anything, because here's the thing about that we need to understand about tithe. And if your church is doing this, send this video to the people, spread it around so they can see, right? It's called returning tithe for a reason. Okay, you don't give the tithe to receive a blessing, right? You give the tithe because you already have received the blessing. What's the blessing? The blessing is that I have been able to be healthy, to work. That's why we call returning the tithe. We are returning to the Lord what belongs to him. He therefore owes us nothing for it, because it is our duty to return the tithe. You understand what I'm saying? It's not a slot machine. Oh, if I give extra money, maybe I'll get a blessing. No. We are returning the tithe. We're returning. Why? Because it doesn't belong to us. Ridiculous. Money grubbing. And the people lap it up. Because then what they'll do is they'll get, oh, can someone testify about how they received? And it's like horoscopes, right? Horoscopes, they give you such a generalized description of something that something in the description is going to apply to you, right? So it's to say, they don't tell you what kind of a blessing you're going to get if you give 15%. And they actually go as far as to say, the bigger your contribution, the bigger the blessing. Okay. You want to go. This is the problem with being Christian, because you want to walk into one of these churches and you want to punch someone's lights out for the sheer audacity, for the satanic audacity of doing that, right? For the sheer bold facedness. In Brazil, we say cara de pau, a face of wood, right? That the person can say something with such a straight face and such conviction, and not realize and not let on. Maybe he doesn't even know that he's being an idiot, right? Sort of thing. These con artists, and so, and so can someone testify, right? There's always going to be some idiot that will interpret something good that happened to him as a blessing that happened as a result of this extra money that they can put in. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Right? It's ridiculous. So yeah, totally obsessed with money. Point number 7, sex. Sex, oh man. You know that there is a problem if there is an obsession with sex. They will do one of two things. They will either forbid sex almost entirely, where if you so much as think a sexual thought, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity, and you need to go into the barn to flagellate yourself. It just occurred to me how that can be, right? You need to go into the barn to get a whipping and get punishment. You need to penance because I had an impure thought. Woe is me, right? Completely. I mean, to the point where people, especially young girls, get traumatized for having any kind of sexuality whatsoever. Now, we're not saying everyone needs to run around, walking around like a slut or whatever sort of thing. There's a fine line. So that's on the one hand, right? And then on the other hand, you have complete sexual obsession where people will just fornicate until they go blind. Right? There's actually if you look in the psychological literature, there's a personality disorder known as histrionic. And histrionic describes an individual who is hypersexualized and has a tendency to behave in a sexually improper manner a lot. Very, very hypersexualized. Okay? It's actually a mental disorder. And also, if a person either refrains from sex completely or becomes hypersexualized, you immediately know that there's a personality disorder there. Immediately. Right? It goes back to what I said earlier on, where through the abuse, if there's abuse, the person either retreats completely from sex, completely, or they become utterly promiscuous. Histrionic, they call it. Histrionic. Emotionally unstable. Histrionic. Do you see this in the world? Again, look at feminism. You're not allowed to shame the slut. All hail the slut. Women marching in the streets with vagina hats. Right? In S&M clothing. In stuff that should only be appropriate for the bedroom. They're marching down the street. Right? Having sex with a different guy, 5 different guys on the weekend. Same thing with the men. Same thing with the men. Right? Pornography proliferating. Right? I've done research on pornography and stuff like that, and I wish I didn't have to, because you kind of have to expose yourself to stuff that's nasty. But proliferation, I mean, just think about it, right? Just think about it. In the age of feminism, how do you explain, right, 50 Shades of Grey and the success, right? Because you have, the reason for that is you have within feminism is all of these secular movements, right? Environmentalism, the Black Lives Matter, feminism, all of the isms, right? And even in the religious side, the religious cult, all religious cults and all secular cults, right? Which is all the activism and stuff like that. These are designed to attract and retain damaged people, abused, damaged. That's what it's designed to do. That's why you see emotionally hysterical, irrational, illogical, etc., etc. Men, the same as women. It's not just, one. It's not just one or the other. They both participate, right? Although females are much more likely to join a cult than a male is. So the ratio is about 65 to 45, right? So 65% so if you take all the different cults and stuff like that, and you sort of look at the ratio between men and women, 65% are women, 65 or more, depending on the sources that you look for. 65% are women. Some say 70%, and also depending on the cult, the ratios will be slightly different, sort of thing. So for example, if to give an example, if you think about your really far right sort of Nazi types, you'll see as mostly men, because the rhetoric it's very violent, it's very militaristic and all that kind of stuff, sort of thing. So you'll see a higher propensity for men. But and then if you look at for example, most of these like a lot of these gurus, like these what do you call these Hindu type of gurus and stuff like that, and a lot of these other cults that have sprung up in the West, sometimes it's almost 80%, 85, 90% woman, sort of thing. And then it makes a lot of sense, because if you look at all of the activism, The vast majority of people participating in activism are women. The vast majority. And the reason for that is because of certain personality traits that are more common to women than they are to men. If you're interested in personality traits, check out one of my videos. I go into personality traits and how they differ on average between men and women, sort of thing. So even so, when you look at a lot of the activisms and stuff like that, so a lot of people, they say, oh, the soy boy, right? So very effeminate men tend to have personality profiles that are on average more like what women tend to exhibit. And so you find when you look out there at a lot of the activism, you find that a lot of them are these very effeminate men. Even if when I say effeminate, I'm not saying homosexual, right? Even though they are effeminate, but I'm talking about as a category in general, whether straight or gay, it doesn't matter. Very effeminate, very sort of beta, not even beta, delta male, gamma male kind of thing. Very low status men, right? And women are they the ones out there picketing and all that kind of stuff, women's march, all these kinds of things, right? Because of the kind of personality they have, they're actually a lot more easy to manipulate, because they're again, they're more emotional, they're less, and the emotions override the logic, override the reason, and all that kind of stuff. Which is why in the Bible it says that the family, the man is the head of the home, because the man is more resistant to running off with these kinds of fantastical kinds of things. On average, not all, but on average, women have a greater propensity to run amok with these kinds of cults and all that kind of stuff. And it's also a lot easier. It's also a lot. So the whole, if I take you back to the MK mind control and all that kind of stuff, the abuse, the breaking down of the person's personality into an abused state that is then receptive to being indoctrinated and stuff like that. Because women have softer personalities, it's a lot easier to do that with a woman than it is with a man, because men are a lot more stubborn, they're a lot more hard-headed and stuff like that, which has its own disadvantages. But in this particular case, it's maybe a little bit of an advantage, because men on average tend to be more skeptical, more rebellious, and so the mind control thing has to get at men in a slightly different way, even though they do still get men very, very successfully, sort of thing, where you get like the neo-Nazis and all these kinds of things tend to attract men a lot more. So there's a different way that they get them. But on average, it's a lot easier to do that with women than it is with men, which is why feminism was designed to liberate women, to remove them from the protection of their husbands and their fathers. All right, that's what feminism was designed to do. Feminism was designed to remove all of the social protections that women had, right, from their fathers, from their brothers, from their husbands, and so on and so forth, and leave them completely vulnerable and exposed, so that they could be abused in this manner and all that kind of stuff, and then as a result be manipulated and weaponized in order to bring about the social engineering that we see these days. It's actually very, very sad. It's actually very sad, because what they're doing is something they're using the intrinsic the unique attributes that make the feminine wonderful and desirable. They're taking that and they're abusing it, and they're weaponizing it, which is, it's sickening. And if you're a woman, don't fall for that sort of thing. um so that's what you see. And talking again, you see, going back, if I refer you to the people that were um in the church that are singing this theoeroticism, again, you see a lot of women in the church who come dressed scantily clad and all that kind of stuff. And the priests and the pastors are not saying anything at all, and they're singing they're singing as if Jesus is their boyfriend. So they're eroticizing Jesus Christ. So that sexual thing. So you get in the church, and I see it a lot. There's a stark difference. You walk into a church and you see the stark difference. You see a woman who's dressed almost like a total slut, right, and likes the very emotional and kind of stuff, right, and is completely pathetic, completely whatever. You can't talk to her. Likes that. It seems to enjoy that eroticization of Jesus Christ, all that kind of stuff. She dresses inappropriately, makeup, all that kind of stuff. You see that in the church, but then on the other hand, you also see the opposite, where you see a woman who dresses like she's an Amish. The complete opposite extreme. She dresses as if she's an Amish, or if she's a nun, and she's cold and sour, and you can see that the abuse of the world and the influence. It's like, it's not one or the other. It's and so then the two fight. Even in the church, the two fight. And that's what you see in the church. It's awful. Point number 8. They teach reliance. So you know that you're in a cult because the guru is the only one that has access to God, right? So the only way you can reach God, or the spiritual ultimate, or nirvana, whatever it is through the guru. The one at the top is the gatekeeper, and you have to rely on him or her and her system in order. So you have no direct access. So in Christianity teaches that every single one of us, even though we have a structure, we have pastors, we have elders, and so on and so forth, you still go to God directly through your prayer. You have a personal relationship with God. You don't go through the priest, right? Which is why Catholicism is a perversion. Catholicism is a cult. It just happens to be one of the largest cults in the world, right? It's like, without us, without me, you will be lost. Do you have that in the church? You do have that in the church. You're seeing a lot of people do that sort of thing, right? It's sickening. And again, you're having these personality cults forming around even preachers in Protestantism, in the Orthodox, the East Orthodox, in all of the churches, and even the charismatics and all that kind of stuff, where you have a personality cult. Well, like, again, I see it even in my own church, where the people attach themselves to a very powerful preacher, very charismatic preacher, and stuff like that, and then they think that this preacher is the be all and end all, and they give up their minds, even though the preacher doesn't outright call for it. Right? A lot of them don't even outright call for it, but those people are not studying the Bible. They rely on this preacher to dictate everything that they understand about the faith, which is then why then even within the faith you have a lot of people believing in things that are contradictory to what the church organization holds to be doctrine. Get that? It's rely on me. And now in the secular world you have the exact same thing. The guru, it's like you have what you call a technocracy, right? The technocratic state. It's like, you're not allowed to think for yourself. You're not allowed to do anything for yourself. You always have to rely on experts, right? So, and then if you say anything, what's the first thing that happens? People are like, oh, well, what's your qualification? Have you noticed that? You're not allowed to have an opinion with without some retard coming to you and saying, well, what's your qualification? You're unqualified to have an opinion. Right? Have you noticed that? Right? So unless you're a Dawkins or a Harris or a Al Gore or whatever the case might, unless you have the status of one of the elites in the world, you are basically not allowed to have an opinion. The only thing you need to do is shut up and listen to what the almighty atheist or the almighty politician tells you to believe. You're not allowed to think for yourself. If you question Darwinism, right? If you go into the university and you question Darwinism, you will lose your job. You will lose your job. End of story, right? Science is supposed to be about questioning, and they're supposed to be like, well, if Darwinism is true, go ahead and question it. Why not? And if you're delusional, then your delusion will be exposed. So go right ahead. But you don't get that. They run to the lawyers and everything to silence people. The same thing. Now you've got so you've got these cults going on. You're not allowed to criticize Islam. You're not allowed to criticize the feminists. You're not allowed to criticize Black Lives Matter. You're not allowed to criticize the gods of environmentalism. You're not allowed to criticize the politicians. It's completely ridiculous. And as soon as you do, someone immediately comes to you. Oh, well, what do you have peer review? Do you have peer review? It's like, excuse me, despite the peer review process, half the stuff cannot be reproduced, which according to the principles of science, it's invalid. It's invalid. So it doesn't matter if it's peer reviewed. If it cannot be replicated, it can be peer reviewed out of its backside. It's invalid. Okay. Peer review is just is irrelevant, is absolutely irrelevant, because the peer review board are biased. They only let through what they personally, it's a philosophical gateway. They are gatekeepers. They're establishing a gate. They're gatekeepers, right? I cannot go and study this, right? If I go and I want to study something that contradicts the global warming narrative, I will not be funded, right? Please, Mr. Politician, you know, can I have some money to disprove global warming? Get lost, right? It's like that, right? Please, Mr. Politician, I've got the theory over here that I think might disprove Darwinism. Piss off. They won't entertain you, right? And that's it, man. And if you say if you criticize anyone, racist, bigot, what, etc., etc., you're not allowed to criticize the LGBT movement without risking jail time. You're not even allowed to make a joke without risking jail time, right? And that's what it becomes. That's how you know, and it's punitive, right? They dox you and all that kind of stuff. You will rely on us. You will rely on the state. The state will take care of your wants and your needs. And how will the state take care of everyone's wants and needs? They will tax the living hell out of you, all right, and give it away, right? In the UK, 1/3, I think it's about 33% of government spending all goes to welfare. 1/3. Rely on you. They are going to be your saviors. You rely on them. They are the gateway to salvation. That's how you know you've got a cult, sort of thing. And it's the same thing with these activists, right? Support us. Give us the money. Give us the... We will, you know, and don't you dare speak out against them, because you are then a heretic and off with your head, right? You get... it's crazy. Now, here's one of the most fascinating things. This is the last point. Point number 9. They always rely on, even though they proper proselytize themselves as something new, right? So you often hear like someone like Dawkins or all these idiots, right? They're on the wrong side of history. Have you ever heard that? They're on the wrong side of history, and we've got something new, and this is new, and progress. You could do one of those, you know, one of those comedy videos where you see the person saying that same damn thing over and over again, like a, you know, like they do with politicians and stuff. Oh, but progress. Oh, isn't the right? Oh, but it's 2019. It's like, yeah, and so okay, you get those kinds of things, right? So they propagate or proselytize themselves something completely new, something completely original and stuff like that. Meanwhile, it isn't. They actually borrow the symbolism and the language of ancient religions that came of classical religions, right? So a lot of people sort of look at this and they think, hang on, if you look, there is this sudden increase in the interest for witchcraft. Feminists are going gaga for witchcraft like you cannot believe. Like you cannot believe. The Black Lives Matters people, right? Suddenly black people are so interested in all their old pagan stuff that it's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. All of these old folk mythologies, and they're suddenly interested in all of these kinds of things. The rise of Wicca, the rise of witchcraft, the rise of all manner of occultism, left, right, and center. And you get this thing where I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, right? That kind of garbage, right? And they all believe these things. Even if you think about the transgender movement, right? That if a man says, I believe I'm a woman, I'm just trapped in a male body, what are they actually telling you? right? The individual might believe that they're an atheist, but what they're actually telling you, if they're a woman trapped inside a man's body, that means that they have a female spirit that is separate from the body, and that the spirit has been put into the wrong physical form. That's occultism. That's what occultism teaches. That's what occultism believes, that the body is like a car, is something you just drive around in the physical world in order to interact with it. That's what occultism teaches. They use the symbols, and if you go into every single one of these, you see all of these rappers and stuff like that. Let me see if let me get a picture here, right? So uh, occult symbols with you just need to Google it, right? Oh, it wasn't on. Right, so let's go here. See what all the celebrities give. So here's a good picture. Let me show you guys here. Boom. There's a nice picture there. Right? All the celebrities that they give all of these, right? Freemasonic sign, the left eye, the right eye, the different eyes represent something different, right? You suddenly see all this occultism all over the place, right? The butterfly, that's heavy occultism there. I'm not going to get into what the symbols mean now, sort of thing, but I mean, it's just, look at these guys, look at these idiots here, right? Completely ridiculous. By the way, this Guy Fawkes that you see all the people, right? Look at this Guy Fawkes picture, this Guy Fawkes mask. A lot of people don't realize that Guy Fawkes was a Jesuit. Jesuits, one of the major secret societies that operate clandestinely in the world, right? He was a Jesuit. Okay, and it's very common for, in these occult circles, for people to wear masks in order to cover their identity, right? So here's what happens, right? In occultism, when they have these ceremonies and things like that, they often put on masks, and the reason for that is not merely to conceal their identity, but what happens is they're subsuming their identity into the spirit of the deity or whatever it is that they're worshipping, right? Into whatever spirit it is, they're subsuming their identity into that cult religion, into that cult faith, right? So your own personality gets subdued. So that's where the whole collectivist sort of thing, you see all these people where they think they're rebelling against the government, and they all go and put on these masks, right? So that they're indistinguishable, each one, and that's how you know people are possessed by a foreign spirit. That's the role that masks have in the old pagan myths and all that kind of stuff, right? They're literally just importing all of the old pagan stuff right back into the modern world. These people think that they're secular, they think they're enlightened, it's the same religion. So they put these masks on, and their identities are subsumed by the spirit of the ideology that they are collectively united by, and they go off like mindless sheep into whatever it is that the guru is telling them to go and do. Right? And these Guy Fawkes people think they're rebelling against something, but they're not. They're not. Just like if you think about all the punk rockers and all the goths and all the rappers, they all think they're so individual, but they all dress exactly the same. They look all exactly the same. The only difference is they toe a different party line. That's all they do. But they're exactly identical. Their identities, because they've been abused, because they've been damaged, because they've been stripped down of all philosophy and of all meaning, their identities are gone from the abuse. And that's what happens when you abuse a child, right? You stunt the development of the personality so that they do not develop a personality. That's actually how you create a narcissist, right? A narcissist, people who have no emotions and no sympathy, no compassion and stuff like that. The reason they're like that is because the personality has been killed off from childhood. It's dead. the individual doesn't exist. And so what they put forward is a false personality. It's a false personality, right? Completely false. And that's why you see in the world people, narcissism everywhere, and these fake personalities. And as soon as there's something to attach themselves to, something that will fulfill that narcissistic supply, because a narcissist needs a supply of something, the meaning or whatever it is, they need to get something. If they find a source of narcissistic supply, off they go, right? And the personality is not there. Personality is not there. Interestingly enough, even though Jordan Peterson is a total idiot on some things, one thing he's right about is that when he talks about people being ideologically possessed, and that's exactly what it is. Their identities, and that's what you have with this collectivist, the people on the left. But it's the same thing with the people on the right. You can see it with all this MAGA all over the place and stuff like that, right? People, their identities are subsumed, are suppressed. They're talking about being oppressed. Everywhere you hear is about, oh, I'm a victim, oh, I'm oppressed. All of this stuff needs to show you that the entire world, and it's coming into the churches, nowhere, there is nothing that hasn't been affected by this. Nothing. No church, no state, nothing. Everywhere. And this is how you know that we are living in a world where all these psychological disorders, where everyone has been abused and we're now seeing the results of the abuse playing out. All of us were behaving like abused. The whole mind control, the cult imposition, the satanic cultish. This is why you're seeing the satanic cultish behavior. People all over the place. People are no longer thinking for themselves. They're behaving in promiscuous ways. And they're falling to pieces, and they're desperate for meaning. They're desperate for meaning in their lives, which is why people like Jordan Peterson and all that kind of stuff, who promise to fulfill that need, they're following them and they're going for it. And they're desperately looking for meaning in anything that they can possibly get their hands on, looking for meaning in music. People are inordinately obsessed with music. Finding meaning in music, finding meaning in sports, finding meaning in their pop idols, in their reality TV shows, in their politicians, in their ideologies, whether it be socialism, whether it be environmentalism, all of that kind of stuff. It's all the same thing. The entire world is, especially the West, is just one massive giant. It's like we're all in one giant cult. With small mini cults all over the place. In the same way with the secret societies, you have the main secret society on top that sort of rules above them all, which in my suspicion is the Jesuits. You have the general of the Jesuits right at the top, and then you have all of the other secret societies that sort of branch out, which you have the pyramid, right? You have the pyramid, you have the eye at the top, and you branch out. It's all under one umbrella, one watchful eye of the guru, of the master, of the satanic overlord, right? And then underneath, all the factions break out into different things, and they subsume themselves, their individual personalities, they subsume themselves into their ideology. They repress their identities into their ideology, and they go on and they execute whatever ideology it is that the group forces them to. And if they don't toe the line, they get wiped out. That's why you see everyone out there looks like they've gone insane. People literally, they look at the world and they're like, people have gone insane. And they actually have. What you are actually seeing in the world is a proliferation of personality disorders left, right, and center. And all of these activists and stuff like that, all of these activist movements are promoting and normalizing what is actually psychological personality disorders. Every last one of them. Textbook personality disorders. That's it, man. That's it. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I've talked enough. I think I've talked enough. Thank you very much for tuning in. I will chat to you guys again soon. I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please subscribe and all that kind of good stuff. If you didn't, by all means hit the unlike button, but at least tell me why in a nice way in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong, and off we go, sort of thing. don't mind people saying I'm wrong. I'm not a cult leader. Think for yourself, right? And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Cheerio, bye, and God bless.